In the dying days of the Han Dynasty, when the empire trembled under the weight of corruption and rebellion, the great palace of Luoyang burned for 3 days and 3 nights. Emperor Xian, the last of his lineage, had fled the capital in the darkness before dawn, abandoning not only his throne, but the thousands of servants who had dedicated their lives to the imperial household. Among those left behind was Li Mei, a palace maid who had served in the inner quarters for 7 years. At 23, she had known no life beyond the vermilion walls and golden halls of the Forbidden City. Her world consisted of sweeping marble floors, arranging silk cushions, and serving tea to concubines who barely acknowledged her existence. She had been chosen for palace service at 16, selected for her delicate features and quiet demeanor, from a village so poor that her family had wept with relief when the imperial recruiters took her away. Now, as flames consumed the only home she had known, Li Mei clutched a small bundle containing her few possessions: a jade hairpin her mother had given her, a worn cotton robe, and a small pouch of rice she had managed to save from the kitchens. The other servants had scattered like leaves before a storm, some fleeing to distant relatives, others simply disappearing into the chaos of a city without law or order. Li Mei had nowhere to go. Her village lay hundreds of li away, and she had no money for travel. The roads were dangerous, filled with bandits and deserting soldiers who showed no mercy to lone women. As the sun set on the 3rd day, casting an orange glow over the smoldering ruins of the palace, she made her way to the servants' quarter of the city, hoping to find someone willing to offer her work in exchange for a meal and a place to sleep. What she found instead was a marketplace of desperation, where former palace servants sold themselves to anyone with a few copper coins. Chapter 2. The Auction of Forgotten Lives. The scene that greeted Li Mei in the servants' quarter would haunt her dreams for years to come. Former palace workers, once proud to serve the Son of Heaven, now stood in ragged lines as merchants and minor officials examined them like livestock. Women who had once dressed the emperor's concubines in silk now wore dirty, torn robes and kept their eyes fixed on the ground in shame. An old eunuch who had served in the palace treasury was calling out prices. Experienced kitchen maid, knows all the imperial recipes, only 20 silver pieces. A young woman Li Mei recognized from the laundry quarters sobbed quietly as a merchant examined her hands for calluses, negotiating her price with cold calculation. Li Mei hesitated at the edge of the square, her stomach cramping with hunger she had been ignoring for days. She had eaten nothing but a few scraps of bread since fleeing the palace, and her strength was failing. The jade hairpin in her bundle might fetch enough money for a meal, but then she would have nothing left of her former life, nothing to remember her mother by. As she stood frozen with indecision, a commotion erupted near the center of the square. A group of soldiers in dark armor had arrived, their presence causing the crowd to part nervously. At their head walked a man who commanded attention without speaking, tall and broad-shouldered, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the scene before him. This was General Wei Qing, recently returned from campaigns against northern barbarians, his reputation built on tactical brilliance and unusual compassion for common soldiers. Unlike many military commanders who saw civilians as either resources to exploit or obstacles to eliminate, Wei Qing had earned respect for protecting non-combatants during his campaigns. The general's gaze swept across the desperate crowd, and Li Mei saw something in his expression that she hadn't expected, not calculation or lust, but something that looked almost like sorrow. Chapter 3. The General's Unexpected Choice. General Wei Qing had come to the servants' quarter not to purchase servants for his household, but to investigate reports of soldiers mistreating displaced palace workers. As a man who had risen from humble origins to command the emperor's armies, he understood the precarious nature of social position and felt genuine sympathy for those whose lives had been shattered by the dynasty's collapse. Walking through the improvised market, he was disgusted by what he saw. Noble families and wealthy merchants treating former imperial servants like commodities, haggling over human lives with the same casual indifference they might show when buying horses or grain. The sight of women who had once moved through gilded halls, now reduced to pleading for basic survival, stirred an anger in him that he carefully kept hidden beneath his military bearing. It was then that he noticed Li Mei standing apart from the others, neither actively seeking buyers nor submitting to examination. There was something in her posture, a quiet dignity despite her obvious desperation, that caught his attention. Unlike the others who kept their eyes downcast, she watched the proceedings with a mixture of horror and determination, as if she were trying to understand how her world had transformed so completely. Wei Qing approached her slowly, noting how she tensed, but didn't retreat. "You were in palace service," he said, his voice gentler than the commanding tone he used with his soldiers. Li Mei bowed properly, her training taking over despite her circumstances. "Yes, honored general, I served in the inner quarters for 7 years. And now you find yourself here," he observed, his eyes taking in her thin frame and the careful way she held herself to hide her weakness. "When did you last eat?" The question, asked with genuine concern rather than idle curiosity, nearly broke Li Mei's composure. 3 days ago, my lord," she admitted quietly. Without another word, Wei Qing turned to his aide. "Bring food and water," he commanded. Then, to Li Mei's amazement, he continued, "You will come with me, not as a purchase, but as a member of my household staff. You'll be treated with respect and dignity." Chapter 4. The Journey to a New Life. The general's estate lay half a day's ride from the capital, set among rolling hills that offered both beauty and strategic defensive positions. As Li Mei sat in the cart Wei Qing had provided for her transport, she struggled to understand why a man of such importance had shown her kindness when he could have simply walked away from the entire sordid scene. During the journey, the general rode alongside the cart rather than ahead with his escorts, occasionally asking her questions about her background and the years she had spent in palace service. His manner was respectful but curious, as if he were genuinely interested in understanding her perspective on the events that had destroyed their old world. "Tell me," he said as they crested a hill that offered a view of his estate below, "what did you think of the palace life? Not the ceremonies and grandeur, but the daily reality of serving there." Li Mei considered her answer carefully. In the palace, speaking honestly about conditions had been dangerous, but something in the general's manner encouraged openness. "It was lonely, my lord," she said finally. "We served people who rarely saw us as human beings. We were like shadows moving through their world, necessary but invisible." Wei Qing nodded thoughtfully. "I suspected as much. I've seen how the nobility treats servants in other contexts. It's a blindness that weakens everyone involved." As they approached the estate, Li Mei was struck by the differences from the palace. Where the imperial grounds had been designed to inspire awe and maintain distance between rulers and subjects, Wei Qing's home felt more human in scale. The architecture was elegant but not ostentatious, and the servants who came out to greet them moved with confidence rather than fear. The general's wife, Lady Chen, emerged from the main house to welcome them. Li Mei immediately noticed that Lady Chen addressed the household staff by name and inquired about their families with genuine interest. This was clearly a household where servants were valued as people rather than treated as disposable tools. Chapter 5. Learning to live. Again, Li Mei's first weeks in the Wei household were a process of unlearning the rigid protocols of palace life and adapting to an environment where her opinions mattered and her well-being was considered important. Lady Chen personally oversaw her recovery, ensuring she received proper nutrition and medical attention for the ailments that came from days of starvation and stress. But more challenging than physical recovery was the psychological adjustment to being seen as a person rather than a function. In the palace, Li Mei had learned to make herself invisible, to anticipate needs without being asked, and to accept criticism or indifference as the natural order of things. The Wei household operated on completely different principles. When she apologized profusely for accidentally breaking a teacup during her first week, expecting punishment or anger, Lady Chen's response astonished her. "These things happen, Mei. Are you hurt? Good. Please be more careful, but don't worry about the cup. It can be replaced." The general himself often asked for her insights when planning household logistics or discussing news from the capital. Having served in the imperial palace, Li Mei possessed knowledge about political dynamics and court procedures that proved valuable as Wei Qing navigated the complex loyalties of the post-Han period. During evening meals, when the family gathered in their private quarters, Li Mei was invited to join the conversation rather than simply serve in silence. At first, she found this overwhelming, unsure how to contribute to discussions between her social superiors. But gradually, she began to recognize that Wei Qing and Lady Chen valued diverse perspectives and genuinely wanted to hear her thoughts. "You have a keen understanding of how power operates," the general observed one evening after Li Mei had offered insights about factional disputes among the nobility. "That knowledge shouldn't be wasted." It was Lady Chen who suggested that Li Mei be given formal education in reading and writing beyond the basic skills required for palace service. "Intelligence is precious," she argued. "We should cultivate it wherever we find it." Chapter 6. The blossoming of hidden talents. As months passed, Li Mei's transformation was remarkable. Proper nutrition restored her health and vitality, while intellectual stimulation revealed capabilities that had been suppressed during her years of servitude. Under the tutelage of the household scholar Master Liu, she learned to read classical texts, practice calligraphy, and understand poetry and philosophy. But her most valuable education came from observing Wei Qing's leadership style and gradually being included in discussions about estate management and regional politics. The general was facing difficult decisions about how to position himself in the chaotic aftermath of the Han Dynasty's collapse, and he found Li Mei's insights increasingly valuable. "You understand the mentality of those who serve power," he explained when she questioned why he sought her opinions on political matters. "That perspective helps me see blind spots in my own thinking." Li Mei's knowledge of palace protocols and noble family connections proved particularly useful as Wei Qing navigated relationships with other regional commanders and surviving members of the imperial court. She could predict how certain families would react to political developments and suggest approaches that would appeal to different factions. More importantly, her presence in the household began to influence how Wei Qing thought about leadership more broadly. Her experiences as someone who had been powerless in the imperial system made him more aware of how his own decisions affected common people who had no voice in political affairs. Lady Chen, meanwhile, had begun treating Li Mei less like a servant and more like a younger sister. She taught her about managing a large household, dealing with vendors and neighbors, and the social skills necessary for someone of higher status. "You have natural intelligence and grace," Lady Chen told her. "With proper education and experience, you could manage your own household someday." The suggestion seemed impossible to Li Mei, who still thought of herself as a former palace maid saved from starvation by charity. But she couldn't deny that she felt more confident and capable than ever before in her life. Chapter 7. The proposal that changed everything. The pivotal moment in Li Mei's transformation came during the autumn festival, when Wei Qing's estate hosted a gathering of regional commanders and their families. Li Mei had helped plan the event, drawing on her palace experience to ensure that protocols were properly observed and that the various social hierarchies were respected without creating offense. During the formal banquet, she moved through the gathering with quiet efficiency, ensuring that guests were properly served while remaining largely invisible in the way she had learned at the palace. But Wei Qing had instructed the serving staff to treat her as a coordinator rather than a servant, giving her authority to direct other workers and solve problems as they arose. After the guests had departed, Wei Qing asked Li Mei to join him and Lady Chen for tea in their private quarters. She expected to be thanked for her work during the festival, perhaps praised for her organizational skills. Instead, the conversation took a direction that left her speechless. "Mei," the general began, using the familiar name he had adopted for her, "Lady Chen and I have been discussing your future. You've proven yourself intelligent, capable, and completely trustworthy. You understand both the worlds of common people and nobility. We believe you're ready for greater responsibilities." Lady Chen smiled warmly. "What my husband is trying to say is that we'd like to propose a formal adoption. You would become our daughter legally, with all the rights and status that entails." Li Mei stared at them in shock, unable to process what she was hearing. "My lord, my lady," she stammered, "I don't understand. I'm just a former palace maid. I have no education, no family connections, nothing to bring to your household." "You have everything that matters," Wei Qing replied firmly. "Intelligence, integrity, loyalty, and the wisdom that comes from understanding life from multiple perspectives. Those qualities are far more valuable than noble birth or inherited wealth." Lady Chen reached across the table to take Li Mei's hands. "We have no children of our own," she said gently. "We've watched you grow and flourish in our household. You've become precious to us, not as a servant, but as family." Chapter 8: The Challenges of Transformation. The formal adoption ceremony took place during the Spring Festival, with careful attention to legal requirements and social protocols. Wei Qing had consulted with scholars and officials to ensure that Li Mei's new status would be recognized and respected by other noble families. The process required extensive documentation and the testimony of witnesses who could vouch for Li Mei's character and capabilities. But legal recognition was only the beginning of Li Mei's challenges. Transforming from servant to daughter of a prestigious family required learning entirely new social skills and navigating complex relationships with people who had once been far above her station. Some of Wei Qing's peers were openly skeptical of the adoption, viewing it as an inappropriate elevation of someone from the servant class. During social gatherings, Li Mei faced subtle forms of discrimination from nobles who questioned her right to be treated as their equal. She learned to handle these challenges with grace, never responding to provocations, but demonstrating through her behavior that she belonged in elite society. Lady Chen became her guide through the intricate world of noble social obligations. She taught Li Mei about gift-giving protocols, formal correspondence, and the unwritten rules that governed relationships between families of different ranks. More importantly, she helped Li Mei develop the confidence to assert her new status when necessary. "You must never apologize for who you are or where you came from," Lady Chen advised. "Your experiences give you wisdom that those born to privilege often lack. Use that wisdom, don't hide from it." Wei Qing, meanwhile, began including Li Mei in higher levels of political discussion and strategic planning. He was building alliances with other regional commanders as they navigated the chaotic post-Han period, and Li Mei's insights about human motivation and political dynamics proved increasingly valuable. "You see patterns that others miss," he told her, after she accurately predicted how a rival commander would respond to a territorial dispute. That clarity of vision is exactly what leaders need in uncertain times. Chapter 9. The Marriage Proposal. As Li Mei's reputation for intelligence and capability spread among the regional elite, she began receiving marriage proposals from families seeking to forge alliances with Wei Qing's household. At 25, she was considered quite mature for marriage by the standards of the time, but her adoption into a prestigious family made her an attractive prospect despite her humble origins. The proposals ranged from ambitious younger sons of noble families seeking to improve their status to older widowers who valued her proven administrative abilities over traditional concerns about bloodline and dowry. Wei Qing and Lady Chen discussed each proposal carefully with Li Mei, emphasizing that the choice would ultimately be hers. "Marriage among our class is often about political advantage," Lady Chen explained, "but that doesn't mean you should accept a loveless arrangement. You've proven yourself capable of managing your own life. Choose someone who will value you as an equal partner." The proposal that interested Li Mei came from an unexpected source. Colonel Zhang Wei, one of her adoptive father's most trusted subordinates. Zhang Wei was known for his military competence and integrity, but what attracted Li Mei was his genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions, rather than just her connection to the general. During their formal courtship meetings, Zhang Wei asked about her experiences in the palace, her views on governance and leadership, and her dreams for the future. Unlike other suitors who seemed to view her primarily as a route to Wei Qing's favor, Zhang Wei appeared genuinely interested in her as a person. "I've watched how you handle complex situations," he told her during one of their chaperoned conversations. "You have wisdom beyond your years and the courage to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. Those are qualities I'd want in a partner, not just a wife." Wei Qing approved of the match enthusiastically. "Zhang Wei is a man of principle," he told Li Mei. "He's proven his loyalty and competence repeatedly. More importantly, he sees your true worth." Chapter 10, The Wedding of Two Worlds. Li Mei's wedding to Colonel Zhang Wei became a symbol of the social changes occurring as the old imperial order gave way to new forms of leadership. The ceremony itself blended traditional protocols with adaptations that acknowledged her unique background and status. Wei Qing spared no expense in ensuring that the wedding would be remembered as a celebration worthy of his adopted daughter. The guest list included regional commanders, surviving court officials, and prominent merchant families, demonstrating the breadth of alliances that Wei Qing had built during the tumultuous post-Han period. But Li Mei insisted on including representatives from her original village and former palace servants who had found new lives after the imperial collapse. "I don't want to forget where I came from," she explained to Lady Chen. "Those experiences made me who I am." The ceremony itself was conducted according to traditional protocols, but Li Mei's wedding robes incorporated subtle elements that honored her journey from palace maid to noble lady. The jade hairpin her mother had given her was incorporated into her headdress, transformed through the addition of gold and pearls into a piece worthy of her new status, while maintaining its sentimental significance. During the formal toasts, Wei Qing spoke about Li Mei's transformation in terms that emphasized her own achievements rather than simply his family's generosity. "We are honored to celebrate not just a marriage, but the flowering of exceptional talent that might otherwise have remained hidden," he declared. "Li Mei has proven that wisdom and capability can emerge from any background when given proper opportunity and recognition." Zhang Wei's wedding toast focused on his bride's character rather than her connections. "I marry a woman who understands both hardship and privilege, who has the courage to speak truth, and who sees clearly through the pretensions that often cloud judgment. I consider myself fortunate beyond measure." Chapter 11. The Lady Who Remembered Her Origins. As the wife of a respected military officer and adopted daughter of General Wei Qing, Li Mei now possessed social status that many would have envied. Her household ran efficiently, Her marriage was happy and her opinions were sought by influential people throughout the region. But she never forgot the desperation she had felt in the servants' quarter or the kindness that had saved her from a fate worse than death. Using her position and resources, Li Mei began quietly helping other displaced palace servants and vulnerable women who found themselves without protection in the chaotic post-imperial period. She established a network of contacts who could provide employment, temporary shelter and protection for women who might otherwise fall victim to exploitation. Her most ambitious project was the establishment of a school where young women from poor families could receive education in reading, writing, household management, and basic medical care. The school operated under the patronage of Wei Qing's household, but was Li Mei's personal initiative, funded through careful management of her own resources and donations from sympathetic noble families. Education is the key to transformation, she explained to visitors who questioned the wisdom of educating lower-class women. When people can read and write, when they understand how the world works, they become capable of improving their circumstances through their own efforts. Zhang Wei supported his wife's charitable activities enthusiastically, often providing security for the school and using his military connections to help graduates find respectable employment. He had married Li Mei partly because he admired her compassion and wisdom, and he took pride in seeing those qualities put to beneficial use. The school's success attracted attention from other regions, where similar institutions were established based on Li Mei's model. Within a few years, the network of schools had helped hundreds of women escape poverty and build stable lives for themselves and their families. Chapter 12. Legacy of Transformation. Years later, when historians sought to understand how China had navigated the transition from the Han Dynasty to the new political order, they often pointed to leaders like Wei Qing, who had combined military skill with genuine concern for civilian welfare. But those who looked more carefully discovered that much of Wei Qing's wisdom about governance and social policy had been influenced by his adopted daughter. Li Mei's journey from starving palace maid to respected lady had given her insights into how society functioned at every level. Her experiences with powerlessness made her sensitive to injustice, while her education in leadership helped her understand how to create positive change within existing social structures. The schools she had established continued to operate long after her death, becoming models for female education throughout China. Her approach to charity focused on providing skills and opportunities rather than simple assistance, influenced how later generations thought about social welfare and poverty reduction. But perhaps Li Mei's greatest legacy was the example she provided of human potential being realized through compassion and opportunity. In an age when social mobility was rare and often viewed with suspicion, her transformation demonstrated that intelligence and character could transcend the circumstances of birth. Zhang Wei, who lived many years beyond his wife, often spoke of how Li Mei had changed his understanding of leadership and responsibility. She taught me that true nobility comes from how we treat those who are vulnerable, he would tell young officers. Power is only meaningful when it's used to lift others up. The jade hairpin that had been Li Mei's only inheritance from her birth family was eventually donated to the school she had founded, where it remained as a symbol of how small beginnings could lead to great achievements. Students would look at the simple piece of jewelry, now mounted in a place of honor, and understand that their own humble origins need not limit their aspirations. In the end, Li Mei's story became more than just an account of personal transformation. It became a testament to the power of recognition, how seeing worth in another person and providing them with opportunity could change not just individual lives, but entire communities and societies. The general who had bought a starving palace maid and made her a lady had done far more than save one woman's life. He had demonstrated how wisdom and compassion could create ripples of positive change that would be felt for generations.